Good morning, sixth graders. This lesson is for May the 12th, and today's shout out goes to Zane and Christian. You guys, thank you for the gift cards that you gave me. I got them, and I just wanted to thank you for that. And all of you who sent me something, thank you for making my day special last week for Teachers Appreciation, and I really, really appreciate that. I already spent the Amazon card, so that was fun. Okay, so today's lesson is going to be on pages 114, oops, 114, I mean not 114, 314 and 315, 314 through 315. The number was cut off a little bit. So take a moment, read it, and then we'll continue on with the lesson. Okay, so thinking that you have read it already, let me ask you some questions from the reading. What was the cause for royal officials gaining more authority and power? What was that cause? The cause was legal reforms such as Henry II's use of trial by jury gave more authority to the royal officials. Remember, they had the trial by ordeal, and it just didn't seem fair because you were going to basically die anyway. What caused the famine in medieval Europe? Too much rain, they spoiled the crops and they all died. And of course, the people didn't have enough food to eat. In what ways does too much rain negatively impact crops? Well, first of all, it saturates the soil, and so the plants can't absorb oxygen and the nutrients it needs to grow. And then weakened plants are susceptible to disease, just like a human. If we're weak, if we have a low immune system, it's easier for us to get sick. And weeds can overtake the crops in fields that are too wet to manage. Erosion causes nutrient-rich topsoil. So too much rain could destroy a crop, but also no rain can destroy crops, and that's what happened in the early 20s when you had the Dust Bowl in America, and then also in Ireland when they had the potato famine. How is it possible for plants to thrive in the rainforest? Well, the plants there are suited to live in the rainforest, therefore they have adapted to the environment. So, you know, if you're used to something, then you're not going to get affected by it if you're around it a lot. So, same with animals. Like some animals can thrive in the ocean, of course, and the cold weather. Well, some animals can't. And it just depends on the animal. Then God created them that way to do that. That's just how God is. Why did animals and people die during this time? Because of disease and hunger. And you have to know, in medieval times, they weren't as clean as we are today. Especially now, like washing hands, not touching your face, and not touching people. Now I want to scratch my face because I just said that and I had an itch. But not touching people, it's just, and then eating things that were unhealthy, not sanitary. They would hang the meat up, and they didn't have like refrigerators and freezers to keep the meat fresh. That's why salt was so important. So they got diseases easy by eating bad meat, by having, flies, around the food, or rats around the food, and just very unsanitary. They didn't have bathrooms like we do today. Speaking of bathrooms, I did put a video. I don't know why bathrooms. I think because I watched a video. A guy takes you on a tour through a castle, and he showed you their bathrooms in the castle. So that's a video that I put out for you guys to watch. It's just a tour around a castle that is up still today. And then how did the famine and disease weaken Europe's feudal economy? Well, because of the sickness, the number of workers was reduced. That's one thing. And when people leave and other people have to step in and work harder, a lot of times they're going to demand more wages, better pay, because they're doing extra work. It's like working overtime, all right? And they wanted better conditions, of course. What extended conflict erupted between England and France? The 100 Years' War. Remember, I talked about England and France not liking each other for a very long time, and that's why France helped the Americans. How did the during the Revolutionary War? How did the conflict affect the power of the feudal lords? Well, the feudal lords, they shifted to monarchs and common people, or the power of the feudal lords shifted to monarchs and the common people. English monarchs used tax money to build large skilled armies. Peasants developed national loyalty above their loyalty to a feudal lord. Okay? And then what prompted the growth of towns during 11th and 12th century? They had improved farming methods, which increased food production. We discussed that. And not all people were needed to farm the lands. They had equipment that did a lot of the work now. And many people moved to the towns. And towns grew at key points along trade routes. And then therefore, trade became something that they did instead of farming. They sold their things. And it was kind of like going to a flea market. And you get all that, okay? What prompted townspeople to insist on having charters? They were not lords or knights or farmers, so they did not fit into the feudal structure, but they wanted structure and they wanted laws and they wanted to be free from work obligations that were put on the peasants in the feudal lands. Okay, so they wanted kind of like freedom, but they wanted rules that they could live by in their town. What new social class developed in these towns? The middle class. And a lot of people today, and a lot of you would be known as being in the middle class as far as money is concerned. You know, you're not too rich, you're not too poor, you're right in the middle. And then what groups make the middle class? Well, back then it was merchants and bankers. They were the middle class. Okay? Go to the picture, and it says, read aloud the caption, and I will answer the question. It says, Crusaders built this island castle in the 13th century. Why do you think they would have built this castle on an island? So probably because it's surrounded by water, right? It's surrounded by water, so they can use that as a moat, because we talked about castles having moats and the drawbridge, right? And then it protected them from invaders a lot easier, because it's harder to swim across to get to the castle or use their ships. And then if they saw the ships, it's very easy to point them out, right? And see it, and they could, and then also it made it difficult for the enemy to attack with siege towers or use ladders to climb the walls, okay? That's one thing. Now go to the next page and we will talk about the Renaissance, okay? It says, what started a series of wars between the Christians and the Muslim Turks, okay? The Pope called for a crusade in which the Western Europeans would join the Byzantines to recapture the Holy Land from the Muslim people. And we talked about Byzantium a few chapters back. What did Western Europeans gain from the Crusades? New ideas, goods from other lands, and knowledge on how to build bigger ships. Okay? How was feudalism impacted by the Crusades? Well, any type of war is expensive. So after the war is over, you're going to have debt to pay, and then also huge lives of loss. Okay, we had people had to sell their houses to pay their mortgage. They had many serfs that helped fight, You know, it's like the slaves, they made them fight for the Crusades. They never went back home. It's like, psh, you know, I've done my job. I'm going to go find another place to live. All right. And what was the root cause of the Western schism? Sorry, I can't talk today. There was an argument about who was the true pope. And how was this solved? They elected a pope at the Council of Constance, and that the members could approve of. So it's kind of like even today, pastors that come to churches, they come and they candidate for a church and they'll preach at the church, and then they'll have the people vote on who they want to be pastor. All right, but the people don't choose the candidates most of the time. It's the board or the deacons or the elders of the church. They're the ones who do that, okay? What other problems did the church face? Well, the European kings questioned the Pope's authority. That's one problem. And people became intolerant of the riches and dishonesty of the clergy. Remember, a lot of people couldn't read back then. So the Pope, who spoke Latin, could read the Bible in Latin because it wasn't in their language, and then he could tell the people what the Bible said, but he could lie because the people didn't have the Bible to prove if it was true or not true. All right. Some wanted a better kind of Christianity because this was still all by works. All right. What was the government like by the 1500s? The central governments throughout Europe was run by kings. And then where were people living rather than on the manors? Towns and cities. Talked about that already. What option did scholars have for education besides the monasteries or church-sponsored schools? They had the universities, which we would call colleges. All right. And then what cultural revival began during this period? The Renaissance, okay? So I'm just gonna have you guys read that own thing on the Renaissance rather than read it now because there was a lot of questions and I don't want this to be too long, but what was the Renaissance a rebirth of? It was a rebirth of writing, of learning, okay? This is when Shakespeare came out, and then you have all the other, Leonardo da Vinci type people. What program started because of this rebirth? They began to prepare people to learn secular work. So work that wasn't necessarily to become a clergy, but it could be, a businessman or a merchant or something like that. And then 3 more questions. To whom is Columbus addressing in his journal entry? The King and Queen of Spain. And then how many ships did Columbus fit for the voyage at Palos? 3. And where was Columbus commissioned to go? The Indies. And that's why he called the people, the Native Americans there, Indians, because he actually thought he was in the Indies. All right, so that's your lesson today. We only have 4 more days, actually 3 more days of these videos. So I'll have 3 more days, and then the last week of school, you won't have video lessons with me. And you also won't have your Zoom meeting with me next week. You'll be working with either Mrs. Smallwood or Mr. Cuevas, I don't remember, but they need to finish up at the school year. So tomorrow's Zoom, or today's Zoom, is the last one that you'll have with me. However, if you ever want to talk, even in the summer, if you want to have a meeting with me, or you girls want to get together, or even your boys, and you miss Miss Young, I don't think you'll want to, but even if you did, I'll be there. Just send me a message and we could Zoom. I'll still have my Zoom, whatever it's called, meeting room available for you, okay? So I hope you have a good day. I love you, and I hope you're making good choices.